The hour here on France 24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We are discussing Syria 1 year on. With us to talk about it is Raf Arfouch, who works here in Paris, whose family is in Syria and has family members who are on both sides of the divide. And what's began as an uprising is now turning into, as we saw in that report just before the break, a civil war. From London, Moidin Eldin Latkani of the Syrian National Council. From Beirut, the former military governor of Beirut. Today he's a political scientist who runs the Middle East Center for Studies in Political Affairs, Hicham Jaber. Anna Nestat of Human Rights Watch, and France 24's Mathieu Mabin. I interrupted you rudely because we had to take a break. And you were saying that child we saw in the report had slight shrapnel wound. Those who need more intensive care, though, the border closed off to them. Hicham Jaber, what is the situation on that score? Should the wounded be allowed without conditions inside Lebanon?
Say again, please. Inside Lebanon, you said what's the situation? That's what you mean?
No, the question is those wounded inside Syria who are close to the Lebanese border, should they be allowed in?
Yes, Lebanon did not stop any time to receive wounded from Syria, and Lebanon received thousands of Syrian refugees. Some of them, they need treatment, and they are already in the hospitals in Tripoli and in Beirut. But what happened today, as I heard from your report, I don't see the TV. I'm sorry, I can't see.
You haven't seen the images.
But I don't know why. There is, I can see it. I don't know why the Lebanese closed the border, Lebanese army, and from Lebanese side, and the Syrian army closed it, as I heard, in the village of Harida. We have four legal gates from Lebanon to Syria, and we have 8 illegal, at least, gates. The borders are not drawn between Lebanon and Syria. I think many of the refugees came from Syria, from across the river, across in the north of Lebanon, across between and across the street from the north of the Bika and Al-Ka area and Al-Qasir, if you remember, a few days ago. And Lebanon and Syria, we have 280 kilometers between Lebanon and Syria. Those kilometers, those borders are not all under control, and the Lebanese army cannot control all those borders. The responsibility to control the borders is from two sides. And Lebanon received, as to answer your question, received thousands of the Syrians. We do estimate the number of the Syrians who came to Lebanon since the beginning of came to stay in Lebanon, more than 15,000. Some they came through the legal gates,
and some illegally. Anna Nestat, I want to ask you, because you have just been in the past weeks to Turkey. The Turkish authorities who claim that just for the sole day of Wednesday, more than 1,000 people are said to have crossed from Syria into Turkey. What have you found out?
Well, indeed, there were already, when I was there, about 12,000 refugees who crossed into Turkey. And indeed, over these last days, the numbers are growing because, just like in the report we've just seen, part of the attacks shifted to the north around the city of Idlib. It's coming under government attack, and that's why it's closer to the Turkish border, so people are fleeing from there. And it's very, the situation is very much the same. I interviewed lots of people who were wounded and whom the activists managed to smuggle into Turkey, and they were being treated in hospitals there. Some members of the Free Syrian Army who escape or go back and forth, and lots of refugees, women and children. Just one point is that both along the Lebanese border, the Turkish border, and the Jordanian border, one of the most dangerous developments is the new landmines that the Syrian army is laying along all of these borders, which obviously prevents the movement further.
And Mathieu Mabin, what's the latest information you have regarding that village that you visited?
The latest information is that we had to break the surrounding to get out of the city of El Qusair. The city was surrounded, so what we expect is that a massive attack should happen in the next 48 hours. The Free Syrian Army inside the city knows about it. They are absolutely convinced this attack will happen after they finish the sad job somewhere else.
Muhyiddin Eldin Latkani, there's the sense that the Assad government, the Assad regime, is now going town to town methodically. Is it a case now where they've definitely regained the upper hand? That certainly seems to be the case at this point.
Well, I don't know exactly what you mean in the upper hand. You can go and kill many people and say, well, I am stronger on the land, as he said last week. But let me tell you, this is the life of Al-Assad. You know, this is a Guardian today. That's his email. He is telling the people something, and he doing something in secret. He is talking reform on television, and in his email, his wife paying thousands of dollars on internet shopping, and he spending his time in luxury. And I doubt if he know what's happening on the land where he claim he have the strong hand. You know, the strong hand, the upper hand in the Syria now for the will of the Syrian. The Syrian, after 1 year of this repression and misery and killing, they are clear about what they want. And since they want the freedom,
the Free Syrian Army had to give up its position inside Homs. It looks as though the regime has the upper hand in Idlib. Mathieu Mabin describing here how they're methodically going from town to town, and the number of refugees pouring over seems to indicate that militarily there is the upper hand at this point.
Well, let me remind you that the Assad army entered Dar'a about 10 times, entered Homs about 7 times last Ramadan, and also he destroyed many villages in Jabal al-Zawiya with border with Turkey. That's happening for the whole year, you know. This is not the end of the world, you know. The real battle in the Syrian cities now, not between the Syrian Free Army and the Assad army. The real battle was the will of the Syrian people. And up to now and until tomorrow and for many weeks to go, those people going to fight in the street, they're going to demonstrate, and now while we're asking them to strengthen the peaceful revolution during this year, we know exactly some fraction of the army leaving the Assad now. I am from the village in the border of Turkey, and let me tell you the situation now. I've been in contact with my village this morning. There is only the men with arm waiting to fight. All the children and women gone to Turkey. There is about 10 or 12 or 20 villages like that. The same in the Jordan border around Dar'a. It's the same with Lebanon. So what we are seeing now, not the end of the revolution, we are seeing the beginning of the revolution and the upper hand for the Syrian people.
All right, the revolution, it can also be described as a civil war this Thursday in Damascus and in several other cities, pro-Assad forces putting on a show of force, by the way, with big rallies. We mentioned it, Raaf Arfouch, at the outset. Within your own family, opinion is divided. There's been a lot of people who are still sitting the fence.
I mean, I think particularly in cities like Damascus and in Aleppo, where, you know, half the population is residing in those two cities, I think people want to cling to a sense of stability. And they look at the other developments that have happened in the region. They look at Iraq, they look at Afghanistan, they look at Libya, and they're worried. They're worried that by, you know, if they support the opposition, if the Assad regime was to step aside, what's going to happen to their daily lives? It's going to descend completely into chaos. And the unfortunate reality, at least from the things that I've been hearing, is that the opposition has been quite fractured even amongst themselves. So if the Assad regime is to step aside, it leaves a power vacuum, which is, you know, has a very high option of being hijacked by people with a whole multitude of agendas, none of which have the Syrian people's best interest at heart.
Mathieu Mabin, there's been here in the West, yeah, we're on the outside looking in. A lot of the worry is which group is going to hijack all of this. Is it going to be hardline Islamists? Is it going to be interest from which outside interest? What did you see with your eyes in terms of are there Alawites on one side, Christians on the other, Sunnis on another side? When you were in that village, what was it like?
I can tell you what I saw in El Qusair, and I'm not sure it's the same situation anywhere in Syria. I've never been in Syria before. It was my first time, and I went in El Qusair and only this place. But in this place, the man who brought us in was a Christian. He was a member of the revolution. He was a member of the Free Syrian Army. He was carrying a big golden cross on the chest, and he was officially a Christian. He was not alone. The first house we slept in Syria was a Christian house, and the speech is everywhere the same in El Qusair. There is no religious problem. They are all fighting for one reason: freedom, and that's it. Today, they just want to kill Bashar al-Assad, and that's it. And they promise this is absolutely not an issue, and they associate this issue to Bashar's speech. This is why we were quite surprised today to hear the same words in the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Alain Juppé, who just said he was worrying about the fact that the religious problem could take over in Syria, and he said it is the reason why he wouldn't send weapons to Syria. I think.
Why did he say that, you think?
It's hard to say. Maybe because
the U.S. Secretary of State has made similar noises.
Yes,
Hold on,
absolutely. What I believe, but I'm not sure about it. This is what we saw in Al Qusair. It's that the situation is. The confession, the religion are quite the same on both sides. I think on both sides, it's quite. It's a representation of the Syrian population, and that's it. And people are fighting for ideas, and probably not for religion or ethnic groups or clan. Of course, there is those units, Alawi, those elite units who will fight till the end, and so on and so on. Okay, but we were living with Alawi people in Alawi families. We slept most of the time in an Alawi house, and those people were fighting together in El Qusair. This is Bashar's speech to say that in the future Al-Qaeda will
become a sectarian conflict.
Absolutely, will lead the country and so on. It makes me think about what Gaddafi was saying in Libya. He was saying exactly the same.
Anna Neistat, has Human Rights Watch documented that has it become more sectarian from what you've seen?
I think it has in certain areas, not as a pattern. I would, and trust me, we're looking into this all the time. As always in every conflict, we're looking into both sides and also all of the things that are happening. So we have documented, and specifically in Homs, that was quite a while ago, attacks against Alawites. So I would not completely deny that it's happening, but we have not seen a broad pattern, and I think, of course, a huge part of it is rhetoric that helps the government, as we've seen in many other places. But I think we should not forget about this. We should really keep this in mind. And I think one of the messages that we are trying to send to the Free Syrian Army, to the opposition, whatever it is that they should, by all means, avoid confirming this worst fears and this propaganda that Bashar's regime is selling to the outside world.
All right. We mentioned a little bit earlier in the preface to your report the problem it is for outside journalists to go into Syria. We talked about how when the uprising began, it was already pretty tricky for a journalist to get a visa. Activists, citizen journalists inside, keeping a steady flow of images coming throughout the past year. And as the fighting's intensified, editors at the France 24 observers, and this is an indication that the fighting has intensified, have noticed a clear trend when it comes to our news sources.
Every day for the past year, we've spoken to contacts, activists in Syria, and they've taken great risks over time to give us information, give us videos. And we've seen them, some of them get wounded, some of them have had to flee, and others, a lot of them don't have internet anymore. So we used to have dozens of contacts, and now we only have a handful left.
The security forces came to my house for the first time on the 24th of March. They tried to arrest my father, so we fled. On the 9th of July, both my father and I were arrested. I was tortured for 6 days with electrical shocks. They beat and whipped me too.
What I'll always remember is the video I filmed in a makeshift morgue. These people were killed by the army. We placed the bodies in a refrigerated truck used to carry fruit and vegetables, so they wouldn't decompose. We had no choice. The army was occupying the only cemetery in the region.
And Abdullah, by the way, who you see in that report, has had to flee to Qatar. He's no longer inside of Syria. Raf Harfouch, you work in information technology. We've seen the amazing way in which citizen journalism and activists have sustained things through the internet. What's the trend you've noticed in the past weeks?
I mean, overall, I think both sides are becoming increasingly sophisticated in delivering a particular message, either in the language being used to describe the opposition and the regime, and the language being used to describe the activist or the armed terrorist, depending on which side you happen to be listening to. I think it's making it very complicated for the outside world to get a clear view, especially when you see footage that gets aired, and then you have the government blaming one side and the other side blaming the government, and no foreign reporters online down on the ground to verify. So I find it that while it's been incredible, they estimate that Activist Network have uploaded over 40,000 video clips onto sites like YouTube. At the same time, verifying the accuracy of those videos has become quite challenging. And there have been several instances of even mainstream media using mistaken footage from Lebanon, footage from Tunisia, footage from Egypt, and trying to pass it off as footage from Syria, which creates distrust on both sides. So I think the trend is that both sides are using the same types of networks. I mean, for every Facebook group that is being used to organize a protest, you can be sure that regime forces are using the same social networks to track down rebel activity, to track down dissidents. And so you're seeing a very interesting battle of how these tools can be used and how defining these tools can be based on the intent that's driving behind them.
All right, so Hisham Jaber, we've spelled it out now. We see it's becoming a more and more violent conflict on both sides. We see that both sides are becoming more and more sophisticated in getting their message across. Now, what do you do to end it all? How do you make? How do you put an end to all of this? How do you bring peace?
Yeah, if you give me 2 minutes to go back, to tell the audience what happened. Briefly, 1 year ago, I think when it started in Syria, President Assad said it's a conspiracy, and the Western Bloc said, no, it's a matter of democracy, equality, human rights, etc. And I said at that time both. My opinion is both. Conspiracy and human rights and democracy. No one can pretend there is democracy in Syria and human rights, etc. And no one can also deny that it's conspiracy. Let me tell you why. 2005, Hariri was assassinated. The Syrian army left Lebanon in a dramatic way. Within 3 years, 2005, 2008, Syrian regime was under pressure and was accused to be part of, involved in the assassination, etc. 2008, we find Sarkozy in Syria and Assad in 14th of July in Paris. Then we see Obama, who wanted to send his ambassador. The Congress said no. Then Obama took advantage from dark night and sent ambassador to Syria. Many question marks. Why? Because Syria has 4 strong cards at that time, 2008. And the Western Bloc wants Syria to play with it. Those cards are Iraq, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Palestine, then the relation with Iran. Okay, 2011, Assad did not play with those cards, did not negotiate. They took advantage from the Arab Spring, and that's what happened in Syria. I think Syrian regime lost a lot of opportunities to solve the problem. Syrian regime had many opportunities to solve the problem within that year. If it did work in 4 axes in parallel, 4 axes are military axe. He used only this axe. Syrian regime forgot about the mass media didn't mean anything to the Syrian regime. Third axe, which is the reform, very, very slow. Then you see that after 1 year, they came up to delete the Article 8 in the Constitution. And the fourth axe, which was very important for the Syrian, did not use it, was the diplomatic axe. And I go back to the cards in Syrian hand.
So where do we go from now then? Where do we go from now?
Yeah. Now there is a dead end, in my opinion, when the Syrian regime, and I said a few days ago that I am pessimistic that Kofi Annan will not succeed in his mission. Why? Because he doesn't have any influence on the Syrian regime nor on the opposition. We are talking about ceasefire after 1 year, and if you talk about ceasefire, that means from both sides. This is the first page in the military book. And when you say ceasefire, that means two sides. And now they start to talk about ceasefire from the insurgent and from the Syrian regime. Syrian regime made condition. He answered Mr. Annan. He gave condition. He said, we will accept the ceasefire, but first from the insurgent. Second, he want a commitment that they will stop to support the opposition by weapons and by money, etc. And the insurgent and the opposition refused to sit on the table and to start a dialogue. Right. In my opinion, it's very,
there's a lot there.
difficult.
Let me put this on to Muhyiddin Latkani. What do you think about the concept of a ceasefire?
Well, let me first of all correct Hisham. You know, Assad, he said he didn't negotiate. In fact, he negotiated under the table, and he negotiated with Israel clearly through Turkey. It's well-known fact, and we don't need to deny it just to give the Assad different personality. Anyhow, now, you know, you are really and the Assad himself in the corner. And there is three initiatives, the Arab League one, the Russian one, Russian and Chinese one, and there's the one was being given by the opposition 6 months ago. All those initiatives, you know, the first line on them, the violence must stop. If he agreed to any of them and the violence and shooting stop in the street of Syria, he will be finished by peaceful demonstration within a couple of months. If he didn't agree and he carry on, and I think he is going to carry on killing because he had no other option.
But should the opposition agree? Should the opposition agree to?
Won't wait for him.
Should the opposition agree to a ceasefire?
There will be intervention. I can see it now. Maybe by the West, maybe by Turkey.
Should the opposition agree to a ceasefire?
I didn't quite hear you.
I'm asking, should the opposition, should the Syrian Free Army agree to a ceasefire?
Of course. That we should, the whole world should now try and arm the Free Syrian Army. And I've been puzzled today by declaration now, by statement by Alan Joubert. He is saying we shouldn't arm them because the Syrian people are deeply divided. Not the Syrian people only deeply divided. The Lebanese, as Hisham told you, they are deeply divided. The whole world are deeply divided. So what we do, we just sit and look and watch Assad killing 100 each day. The 100 people each day now is usual number, and people no longer think about it. And maybe you won't put it in the news after 1 week. So we have to do something, and arming the Free Syrian Army is the best way to really have the whole crisis finished.
You're in favor of arming the Free Syrian Army and.
Of course, with no hesitation, this is the only way forward.
All right, and we hear that Mathieu is explaining how the French and American diplomats not so sure about that concept, whether it's a good one. I want to get back before we go, though. You mentioned some of the outside players that are also divided on all of this. And Muhyiddin Latkani was mentioning those emails that were intercepted, the Guardian staging a WikiLeaks coup, publishing those personal emails of Bashar al-Assad, emails that bypass official channels, even within his own government. Some personal, we talk about his wife's shopping, his iTunes account, his bulletproof casual wear. Some more political, and among the more political ones, there's one from Hussein Mortada, an influential Lebanese businessman with strong connections to Iran, who has a TV station. He says, I have even received contacts from Iran and Hezbollah saying they directed me not to mention that Al-Qaeda was behind the bombings back in twin car bombings in Damascus back in December. The idea that Iran is a major player in all this. Anna Nestat, it's an incredibly complex patchwork and puzzle, both domestically and as we're seeing on the outside world. How do you break this impasse? Who do you weigh on?
It's a very difficult question, and I realize we have to wrap up very soon. Let me just take it from my perspective, which is purely on human rights issues. And I do think that making sure that that the regime stops killing people and torturing them is the first thing on our agenda. And how it will have implications on the regional politics is there. I don't want to dismiss this question, but I do think there are several things that could happen. Russia is absolutely key. It's key not only for Security Council resolutions, but it's key in its bilateral relations. The message that they're sending to the Syrian president are very important, but the weapons that they're sending the Syrian president are no less important. And I have to say, one of the things that we're exploring very closely right now is the Russian state-owned company that does all these sales, that actually has dealings with many other countries, and maybe measures against this company, or at least the larger sanctions that would make sure that weapons are not being flooded into Syria to the government, forget the opposition, would be one way to go.
All right, so don't just follow the money, follow also the weapons. Anna Nestat, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well for joining us, Raf Arfouch, for being with us here in the studio. I want to thank Hisham Jaber in Beirut, Mouy Eldin Latkani in London, France 24's Mathieu Mabin. You can see his report in full on our website, france24.com. By the way, just after the show, we're having a Google Plus Hangout. We're going to prolong the discussion with myself and our digital media editor, Eric Olander. Thank you for joining us here for this special edition here on France 24.